They called them the ugliest girls in the village. But they didn't know these girls were about to become legends. This is the true story of Adunni and Tarela, the sisters who turned pain into power. In the small town of Ayegbami, there were two sisters who everyone talked about, but not in a nice way. Their names were Adunni and Tarela, but most people didn't even bother to call them by name. They just said, "Those girls," or worse, "the shame of Ayegbami." Adunni was the older one. She was tall and thin, with skin of many shades from walking in the sun daily. Tarela, the younger sister, had a round face, big eyes that didn't always look in the same direction, and a crooked smile. But no one cared about who they were inside. People only saw what they looked like on the outside. Kids would laugh when they walked by. Grown-ups would look away or whisper mean things. Some men said they wouldn't marry the girls, even if they were given to them for free. But Adunni and Tarela didn't hide. Oh no, they walked through the village like queens. They wore bright clothes, colorful scarves, and too much makeup. Their lipstick was loud, and their eyelashes looked like tiny fans. They wanted to be noticed. They wanted to feel pretty, even if people laughed. Some villagers thought the sisters were just troublemakers. They were always in other people's business, talking loudly, laughing louder, and never keeping quiet when someone insulted them. But behind all the shouting and smiling was a sadness no one saw. At home, they would sit quietly. Sometimes Tarela looked in the mirror and turned away quickly. Adunni would pretend to be busy, so Tarela wouldn't hear her crying. They missed their mother, Mama Risi, who used to say, "Beauty lives in your heart, not your face." But the town didn't care about hearts. One evening, after a long day filled with whispers and laughter behind their backs, the sisters sat under the big irako tree near their house. Tarela whispered, "Sister, I'm tired." Adunni looked at the sky. The stars were quiet. "Me too," she said softly. That night, something changed in their hearts. They didn't know what to do, but knew they couldn't keep living this way. They needed to find something different, something better. The next few days in Ayegbami felt slower for Adunni and Tarela. They didn't wear their bright makeup like before. They didn't shout or laugh loudly at the market. They didn't even join the village gossip like they used to. People noticed. "What and do those girls?" someone asked in the market. "Dem don finally tire?" But nobody really cared. They were just curious. After all, the sisters had always been loud and bold. Now they were quiet, like birds who forgot how to sing. At home, things were even quieter. Their little room felt colder, like the walls were listening to their silence. The mirror on the wall had a crack, and whenever Tarela looked at it, she quickly looked away. Adunni sat by the window, holding their mother's old wrapper. She missed Mama Risi more than ever. Mama had always made them feel special. She had told them stories, sung songs, and reminded them daily that their hearts were beautiful, even when the world was not kind. But now Mama was gone, and the world still laughed at them. One night, after a long silence, Tarela spoke. "Sister," she said softly, "do you think Mama was wrong?" Adunni turned slowly. "About what?" "About beauty. Mama said it's in the heart. But nobody sees our heart. They only see our face." Adunni didn't answer right away. She looked at her sister, her eyes full of sadness. "I don't know," she said. But I don't think she lied. Maybe people just don't know how to see properly. Tarela wiped her eyes. "Then how do we make them see?" Adunni thought for a long time. Then she stood up. "We need help," she said. "Real help. Not makeup or new clothes. Something deeper." "Like what?" Tarela asked, confused. Adunni's voice was calm but strong. "I don't know yet, but I believe it's out there. Somewhere." And that was when they decided. They wouldn't wait for the village to change. They would find their own way. Maybe it was magic. Perhaps it was something else. But one thing was clear. They were ready for something new. The next morning, before the sun was fully awake, Adunni and Tarela packed a small bag. They didn't take much, just 2 wrappers, their mother's old Bible, and a bottle of palm oil. Tarela also added a small comb Mama Risi used to keep by her pillow. It still smelled like home. They wrapped their heads with scarves and stepped out quietly. Not even Mama bossied, The nosy neighbor who always watched them from her window saw them leave. The town was still asleep. The air was cool. The red earth felt soft under their feet as they walked past the same houses where people had laughed at them. But today they didn't feel shame. They felt something different, hope. "Where are we going?" Tarela asked after a while. "To Okibo," Adunni answered. Tarela's eyes widened. "That far?" "Yes," Adunni said. "There's a woman there. Some say she's mad. Some say she's a prophetess. But people say she helped a man with a twisted leg walk again. Maybe she can help us too." They walked through farms and forests, crossed small streams, and waved to kind strangers who gave them water. The sun rose and fell, and still they walked. At night, they slept on a mat offered by a kind old woman who didn't ask too many questions. Tarela looked at the stars and whispered, "Do you think she'll help us?" Adunni smiled gently. "I don't know. But we're not just walking for help. We're walking because we're tired of hiding." Tarela nodded. Her heart felt lighter, even though her feet were sore. They were moving towards something for the first time, not just away from pain. After 2 days, they finally reached the edge of Okibo. The trees were tall and strange, and the air smelled like herbs and smoke. Like in the stories, there was a round mud house with white marks on the walls. Dried leaves hung from the roof like sleeping bats. An old woman sat outside, stirring a pot. She looked up as they arrived and said softly, "I've been expecting you." Adunni and Tarela looked at each other. Maybe this was the beginning of the change they had been waiting for. The old woman's name was Mama Afunsitan. Her skin was wrinkled like dried fruit, and her back was bent, but her eyes were so bright that Tarela looked away the first time she saw them. They weren't scary eyes, just eyes that saw too much. She didn't ask why they came. She didn't ask their names either. Instead, she led them inside her small hut and gave them water. The water tasted sweet and cold, like it had been taken straight from a mountain spring. After they ate the roasted yam she offered, Adunni finally spoke. "Mama, we came because we are tired," she said. "People mock us. They laugh at us. We don't want to hide anymore." Tarela added, "We want to be free, to be seen, not just as ugly girls." Mama Afunsitan listened without saying a word. Her hands were folded in her lap, her face calm. When the sisters finished talking, she nodded slowly. "I understand your pain," she said softly. "But listen carefully. You came here hoping to change how you look. But true change doesn't start on the skin. It starts inside." Tarela frowned. "But Mama, nobody in Ayegbami looks inside. They only see our faces." The old woman smiled a little. "Ah, but that's the world. Many people are blind, not in their eyes, but in their hearts." Adunni's eyes were wet. "So, you can't help us?" "I already have," Mama Afunsitan replied. "By telling you the truth. Go back home. Something big is waiting for you there. Your story is not finished in Ayegbami." The sisters were quiet. The wind outside rustled the leaves, as if nature itself was listening. "But we're tired," Tarela whispered. "We are really, really tired." Mama Afunsitan stood slowly and touched Tarela's cheek. "Then rest. But don't give up. Your light will shine, but not the way you think." That night, the sisters slept in the hut. They didn't dream of beauty or magic. They dreamed of home, Mama Risi, and all the things they still wished for. In the morning, they said goodbye and began their long walk back. But something in their hearts had changed. The walk back to Ayegbami felt longer than before. The sun seemed hotter, the road dustier, and their hearts heavier. Tarela didn't talk much. Adunni's steps were slow. They both thought about what Mama Afunsitan had said. When they saw the rooftops of their village, their hearts sank. Nothing had changed. The same children played in the dirt. The same women sat at their stalls, chewing kola nuts and gossiping. And as the sisters passed, the whispers returned. "Ah, Demdon come back? I think say them go find new village. Wetten them bring from their waka? Still ugly-o." The words were sharp, but the sisters didn't stop. They walked straight to their house, opened the door, and sat down. For a while, the room was silent. Then Tarela spoke. "Sister, you believe that old woman?" Adunni sighed. I don't know, but I believe we can't keep living like this. What will we do? Tarela asked. Adunni looked at her with new fire in her eyes. If the village won't change how they see us, we will give them something they can't ignore. Tarela raised an eyebrow. Like what? We will rise, Adunni said. We will become more than they expect. More than they can laugh at. Tarela blinked. But how? Adunni smiled a little. Let's not fight them with makeup or shouting anymore. Let's do something bigger. Let's surprise them. Tarela sat up straighter. For the first time in days, she smiled. That night, under their zinc roof, as the rain tapped gently and thunder rumbled far away, they sat by the small fire and talked. They shared memories of Mama Risi. They talked about dreams they had pushed away. They spoke about who they wanted to become. Then, softly, Tarela said, "Do you remember that story Mama used to tell? The one about the river that shows your true self." Adunni's eyes lit up. "The River of Ayika?" Tarela nodded. She said if your heart is pure, the river will show you your real beauty. Adunni leaned forward. "You think it's real?" "I don't know," Tarela said. "But what if it is?" And just like that, a new plan began to form. By the time the sun peeked through the clouds the next morning, Adunni and Tarela had decided. They would search for the river their mother once spoke of, the magical River of Ayika. Mama Risi had called it the mirror of the soul. She said it was hidden deep in the forest beyond the village hills. Only people with kind hearts and true pain could find it. The river, Mama said, didn't give you a new face. It showed you who you really were. And sometimes that was even more powerful. Adunni packed the same old bag again. They didn't need much, just food, water, and a cloth to sleep on. Tarela added their mother's Bible and her old comb again. This time, they didn't tell anyone they were leaving. Not even Mama Basid. They just slipped away while the village was still yawning. They followed the old forest path Mama Risi used to talk about in her bedtime stories. It led past the mango trees near the stream, over a small hill, and into the thickest part of the forest. They heard birds singing and leaves whispering in the wind as they walked. It was peaceful, but also strange. The forest felt alive, like it was watching them. Tarela held Adunni's hand. "What if we don't find it?" Adunni smiled gently. "Then we'll still know we tried." The journey wasn't easy. They walked for hours. Their feet ached. Their clothes got dirty. They crossed streams and climbed over fallen trees. But they didn't stop. Sometimes they laughed about silly memories. Sometimes they were quiet. But in their hearts, a small hope kept glowing. Each night, they slept under the stars and listened to the sounds of the forest. And each morning they kept moving. Days passed. Then a week. Still they walked. And one afternoon, just when they thought they might turn back, they heard something, soft, like a song made of water. They followed the sound through the trees. There, shining in the sunlight, was a quiet, sparkling river. It looked just like the story. Tarela gasped. "Adunni, we found it." And Adunni whispered, "Yes. This is Ayika." The river Ayika didn't look magical at first. It was calm and clear with water, so it still looked like glass. Birds chirped nearby, and butterflies danced over the surface. But something about the place felt different, quiet, but full of mystery, like the river knew many secrets. Adunni and Tarela stood at the edge, not sure what to do. "Should we just step in?" Tarela asked. Adunni looked around. "Mama used to say the river shows you your truth. Maybe we don't need to step in. Maybe we just need to look." Tarela knelt beside the water. Slowly, she leaned over and looked at her reflection. What she saw made her eyes fill with tears. She didn't see the crooked teeth or the eyes that wandered. She saw a girl with strength in her eyes and kindness in her smile. A girl who had walked far, cried often, and still kept hope in her heart. "It's me," she whispered. "But not the me they laugh at. It's the me I feel inside." Adunni joined her and looked into the water too. Her breath caught. She saw herself, not the patchy skin or the sharp bones, but a tall woman standing proud, with eyes full of fire and love. A woman who never gave up, even when it hurt. They sat there, quiet, letting the river show them their hearts. No magic light burst from the water. Their faces didn't change, but something inside them did. They felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in their lives. Tarela smiled. So this is what Mama meant. Beauty from the inside, but seen with different eyes. Adunni nodded. The river didn't change us. It reminded us who we already were. They stayed by the river until the sky turned orange. As they left, they felt lighter. Not because the world would stop laughing, but because they no longer believed the world's lies. They knew the truth now, and that truth was stronger than any insult. Hand in hand, they turned away from Ayika. They were ready to go home. When Adunni and Tarela returned to Ayegbami, nobody noticed at first. The sun burned hot, the market buzzed with noise, and children ran barefoot through the dust. Life in the village moved on as if the sisters had never left. But something had changed. Not the villagers. No, they still whispered. They still made faces. But Adunni and Tarela were different. They walked through the streets calmly, heads held high, eyes full of peace. No makeup. No loud colors. No shouting. Just silence and a quiet strength. Mama Bossied, peeping from her window as usual, blinked in surprise. "Dem no wear red lipstick today," she whispered to herself. At the market, some women nudged each other. "See dem," one said. "Dem don humble?" But the sisters didn't stop to argue. They smiled, nodded, and kept walking. Tarela bought yams without saying much. Adunni helped an old woman lift her basket. The people around didn't know what to say. The sisters weren't acting like before, but weren't hiding either. Later that day, a small girl followed them home. Her name was Kemi, and she had always watched them from afar. "Why do people laugh at you?" Kemi asked softly. Tarela smiled. "Because they don't understand us." "Are you sad?" "Sometimes," Adunni said. "But not today." "Why?" Adunni looked at her sister, then at the sky. "Because we saw something that made us feel strong again." Kemi thought for a moment. Then she said, "I think you're beautiful." The sisters smiled. Not the fake kind they used before. This smile was real. That evening, they sat outside their home, watching the stars. "We're not just the ugly girls anymore," Tarela whispered. "No," Adunni said. "We're more. We're stronger. And we'll do something with that strength." And right then, under the quiet night sky, they started dreaming a new dream. They would help others, especially girls like them. They would teach them stories, confidence, and how to see beauty in themselves. They weren't just back. They were beginning something new. Adunni and Tarela didn't wait for the village to accept them. They created their own path. The very next week, they cleaned out the small back room in their house and turned it into a tiny learning space. They painted the walls with bright colors and wrote on the door, "The Heart Room, a place to grow and shine." At first, only one girl came, Kemi, the little girl who had followed them home. She sat on a small stool, wide-eyed and ready. The sisters smiled and began. They told her stories. Not fairy tales, but stories of real people who faced pain and stood strong. They taught her how to read a little, how to draw, and how to speak with confidence. Word spread fast. Soon, 3 more girls joined. Then 5. Some came shyly, peeking through the door first before stepping in. Others were sent by mothers who had once laughed at Adunni and Tarela. "Let them learn from you," one woman said quietly. "You are braver than we thought." The sisters didn't teach from books alone. They taught with love, laughter, and truth. They told the girls it was okay to be different, that strength comes from the inside, that no matter what others say, your worth is not their decision. Each day, more children came. Slowly, Ayegbami changed, not because the people stopped whispering, but because they started listening. One evening, after the children had gone, Tarela sat on the front step, watching the sun melt into the sky. "Sister," she said, "I never thought we'd be teachers." Adunni chuckled. "Neither did I. But maybe this is why we were made different." Tarela smiled. "Maybe we were never meant to be like everyone else." "No," Adunni agreed. "We were meant to shine our own way." They sat in the golden light, peaceful and proud. And though some people still whispered behind their backs, many more smiled when they saw them. The bold sisters of Ayegbami were no longer just a story of pain. They were becoming a story of hope. Time passed in Ayegbami, and the little back room became more than a classroom. It became a safe space. Girls who once hid their faces now stood tall. Boys who laughed before now helped carry books and water. People still talked, but the whispers were different. "They've done something special," some said. "Those sisters, they have heart." Even the chief of Ayegbami sent a message one day, asking the sisters to visit the palace. He wanted to see this heart room that was changing his village. Adunni and Tarela stood before him proudly, not because they wore fine clothes, but because they had found their voice. They shared their story, not just the pain, but the strength, the lessons, and the river. When they were done, the chief nodded slowly. "You didn't wait for Ayegbami to change. You changed first. And now the village is following you." He gave them land near the school to build a bigger space. People donated benches, books, and food. Even the women who once laughed loudly came to help sweep and cook. One morning, a new girl arrived as the school opened for another day. She wore big glasses and walked with a limp. Her eyes looked scared. Adunni knelt down and took her hand. "Welcome," she said warmly. "You are not alone here." The girl smiled a little. Inside the classroom, Tarela was singing with the other children. Their laughter rang through the air like music. Later that evening, the sisters sat under the iroko tree where they once whispered their pain. Now they sat in peace. "Do you miss the river?" Tarela asked. Adunni shook her head gently. "No, because the river is still with us." Inside, they both smiled. And in that quiet moment, with the sun setting behind the red rooftops of Ayegbami, they knew their journey was far from over. They were no longer the ugly girls. They were leaders, dreamers, and healers. They were the sisters who changed everything. And their story, like the river, would keep flowing forever.